When we look at decision intelligence as a space where we combine machine learning AI with this natural language interface, where business users or the analyst can get answers across terabytes of data, understand not only what's happening, but why things are changing and how you can improve outcome. That definition isn't very clear. It's not a clear-cut definer because it's a new category in a way.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our Apply Tech series. UpTech Report is sponsored by Terraleap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today, I am joined by my guest, Ajay Khanna, who's based in the Washington, D.C. area, and he's the CEO and founder at Tellius. Welcome, Ajay. It's good to have you on.
Hey, Alexander. Great to be here today.
Now, Tellius, if I understand correctly, is a business analytics platform specifically designed for enterprises out there that are trying to get more data-driven insights faster to be able to make better decisions. We all want to make better decisions. So did I get that correct, though, what you guys are focused on?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely right.
So help me understand it being, okay, you're focused on enterprises and they're trying to make better decisions. What's the real challenge then that you're seeing, that they're facing and feeling every day?
No, that's a great question. So the challenge we see, Alexander, that organizations are collecting a massive amount of data. But when we look at the amount of insights they are creating, there's a massive insights gap there. And the reason we see this gap and the insights gap is there are two silos there. We see the BI and the dashboarding silo, and then we see the machine learning and the AI silo. Now, let's talk about the BI and dashboarding. Every organization uses some kind of reporting mechanism, but mostly organizations with the amount of data they are collecting have hit a wall with their current BI stack. And they want to also move beyond BI dashboard, not look at pretty pictures and reports, not at high level KPIs, but be able to drill down and understand why things are changing. And that's something, a theme you will hear from me a lot. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And that's actually kind of the core theme for us in Tellius. As a business we're doing, but also not only with the technology side, but as a company also, we really believe in that. So organizations want to understand why, and that's becoming really, really challenging with the current BI technologies. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you see machine learning AI. You hear a lot of that talk, but those technologies are still not accessible to the business teams. They're still used by the advanced users who understand what those algorithms are. So that's kind of leading to where the business users, business analysts are not able to leverage these machine learning AI technologies to get those insights from the data. And that's the problem we see.
This terminology say siloed. It's like they cannot connect it up to this point. You say BI, business intelligence, a dashboard of pretty numbers, but they can't get any further than just seeing the top numbers. Then the machine learning, which gives you all the interesting insights, but it requires a data analyst, a data scientist to be able to work with that. You're trying to bridge that gap because of that challenge. Is that what you're focused on?
That is absolutely correct. We're trying to bridge the gap. And the way we see that if you're able to bridge that gap, I think there's a lot of things will happen. First of all, that if you hear about, there's a lot of numbers out there that 80% of the MLAI projects fail, right? And the reason they fail isn't that they were not the right technical resources, but more importantly, what business teams and the data team, were they aligned or not? And I think that's a big challenge you see. So if you bridge the gap, then what happens is you can bring in the domain expertise of the business teams. They understand their data. They understand the problem they are trying to solve. And then you utilize machine learning and AI to do what they do best. And machine learning is really good at churning data, figuring it out, the key contributors. And when you combine these things together, the magic happens. And that's kind of where we see a huge gap. And that's where Tellius is focused on.
Ajay, do you just really enjoy enterprise data? Do you like, oh, I wake up every morning, I'm like, yes, I can't wait to help people understand their data more. What drives you?
Yeah, I would say it's certainly an evolution and journey where at some point it started with more kind of this aspect of bringing in automation. So it started with the automation. It was kind of evolution and journey. I don't think if I rewind back 15 or 20 years back that I didn't even know what data analytics mean or heard of that term. But it started with this desire of automation. And I think this one thing which always stuck with me is that there's two scenarios. either you automate something or your job is going to be automated. So you pick one, right? So I prefer to pick the first one. Like, let's automate things rather than automating our jobs. So the way it is that, and that's where it started. But then eventually, as we were looking at automation, I come from a telecom background, and we were actually doing all this analysis for telecom data, and it was a very niche problem at that point we were solving. That, how do we look at all the data, figure out which area we need to focus on in telecom scenario, working with companies like AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon. And that kind of gave this birth of this idea is like, oh my God, this is just not telecom, but if you expand it to different industries, there is such an opportunity to unleash power of data. And I think if I look at in the last few years, yeah, that's certainly something which excites me, get me out of the bed and said, what, we are sitting on this massive amount of business data. Now, how do we unleash the power of this data, right? How do we get the business opportunities out of the data, in a much more easier way than we do today?
Now, your history just mentioned, starting in telecom, you were actually handling the data, working with, and your previous company is one of the founding members, right? And became the CTO. Is that correct?
That is correct. So my previous company, yeah. So my journey was that this is my second startup. The previous company was named Cellsite, and Cellsite was, when we started it. It started as a services company. This was 2004-5 timeframe. We did not know where to raise money, how to raise money. None of that. None of us was rich. So we're like, oh, how do we make this happen? And then we ended up doing services. So we said, like, okay, let's go to, work with T-Mobiles, Verizon's, AT&T's. They have some projects. We took over some projects. And then eventually, like, I had this kind of product manager, product guy in me. Always, like, I wanted to always build products. So we started with that. We got some money from the services and generated enough revenue. And then we said, oh, let's build a product. And then we ended up building a product which we deployed with the AT&Ts and T-Mobiles, which was very much focused in the telecom space. It was more helping them optimize their network quality. But that's kind of where this whole thing, when we also saw a gap, because we were building this platform, and we were like, oh my God, there's nothing out there. There are these pretty dashboards. And then you got these data science tools, which, none of us or most of the team members did not know how to operate them. So we ended up doing a lot of SQL, Python stuff, and put all this code together, and then build something. And then we're like, it's not scalable, right? I mean, we were like, okay, this works for a certain use case, and also, so we figured out something where it's like, okay, this works. We understand, we can automate some of that stuff. And combined with the fact that iPhone was launched at that point, which the whole world benefited, and we benefited now, because when iPhone launched, then AT&Ts and T-Mobiles, they couldn't hire enough people to manage those networks. So they ended up using our platform. So that was kind of evolution where we're like, okay, so there is a huge scope for automation. Like, what we had built was a very niche, domain specific thing. And then machine learning was coming to life and was becoming more accessible. So we were like, okay, so if we were to now expand it, if you embed machine learning into kind of BI, combine BI and AI together, then you can actually apply this aspect to more industries.
So automation has always been a focus for you. I love it. You already said either be automated or automate other things. I'll choose to automate other things. Where did then the business intelligence side, was it right around this area where you were helping as a services, and then you built a product and you're realizing providing business intelligence, there's a big need for it?
Exactly. So what was going on was that in a way, you can think the previous company was very custom BI for telecom analysis. You can think of that, right? So it was because what is BI? Business intelligence, right? As the business intelligence, we want to get some information from the data, present it in some way to the team. So that's kind of the objective at that point was. But we also were looking at that, going a little bit beyond BI, meaning I would call BI a lot of reports and dashboards. But then you have to understand, why things are changing. So we were like, okay, why a network quality drop last week? Why the customer complaints have gone up by 50% last month. And all these questions, how are we answering it? We were actually, created some business logic using SQL Python. And then we embed that with a nice UI. And then, we're handing over to the users. But then that kind of was an idea which worked fine for some use cases, but was not a scalable idea. We were actually expanding outside US. We were actually expanding in Latin America. We were going to Asia Pacific, and all these areas. When we went there, we saw that the logic which worked fine in LA and New York didn't really work in Johannesburg, South Africa, and then it didn't work in Dubai. So what that meant was that you need machine learning, which can learn from your data and kind of tune the rules, then provide an output which is more tuned to your current scenarios or so.
Integrating machine learning into this model, then, was that a simple process?
It was actually, it's always those things which they never turn out kind of what you originally expected, which actually I always think it's always a good thing that naiveness really works for you. So, we went through the first company. It was actually a pretty good exit. We actually ended up growing from few of us in 2004 to we were about 400 of us doing 100 million in revenue in 2014. When we got approached by a company named Amdocs, we ended up getting acquired by Amdocs. I don't know if you know, Amdocs is about a 5 to 6 billion company, publicly traded company, and they wanted to move or expand into the network analytics side. So I was with Amdocs for a year, and then I was like, okay, so let's see what
something new.
what to do. I think that the entrepreneur kind of bug was coming back, and was like, oh, I need to do something. I need to build some product. And with that, we start looking at this idea is okay, so what we need to do now is look at these 2-3 areas. One of the thing was that BI really hasn't changed in the last 2 decades. So one of the driver force was that the dashboarding and its interface hasn't really changed. So it used to be dashboards on desktop, became dashboards on clouds, client server, then became dashboards on cloud, but it's still dashboards, right? So what we're thinking is, how do you create a revolutionary new UI? You can think of an iPhone for analytics, kind of the idea. How do you create an iPhone for analytics, right? And for us, that was that you have to provide a Google-like search interface. So what we thought is okay, we need a Google for your business data, right? So you have a search interface which we use for everything we do today, right? We want to book a flight, we go online and do something, and then get a flight booked in a matter of a minute or two. You want to buy a pair of shoes, you can do that in a matter of a few minutes. But it's not the same for your business data, right? If you have a business question, you can go and type a question saying, okay, tell me, what happened to my campaign conversion last week in California, for social media, right? You can type a question today, which is actually sounds pretty strange, especially now we're in 2021. When we were started to think in 2016, we're okay, there should be a Google-like search interface, and for the data. So we started working on that. And at that point, none of that existed, for your business data, and especially when you have terabytes of data in your system coming from disparate sources, and you want to provide this interface which is very different than a typical search, because typical search, you're just looking for the documents. In this case, when you ask a question, there's going to be a SQL query underneath. It's going to go and query this data, create a chart on the fly, and it's all happening in 1 to 2 seconds. So a chart gets created on the fly. So we started looking at it. We started thinking, okay, how do we find the right people, and ended up going through experimentation like any other startup would be. Ended up finding some individuals, do a lot of that experimentation, and ended up building that interface, which was, took us almost 2.5 years.
And you bootstrapped this first portion yourself?
Yeah. So one thing we had, mine was, by the way, in a previous company was an interesting story that we never raised money. We never raised money in a previous company.
Customer funded.
It was all kind of growing that. So it's very interesting when you talk to the CEOs or founders or some of the team members, their normal kind of resume would be, I raised so much money, right? So when I say in our previous company, we did not raise any money, but we actually had almost 980x, almost 1000x ROI on the initial investment over the 9-year window. But it was fun. We made a lot of mistakes. So we know what mistakes not to do in the new venture, just make new mistakes there. But it was actually fun. But we ended up bootstrapping that for 2.5 years. So I put in some of the money venture from my previous venture, and then actually I pulled in my other business partner from my previous company because he was almost retiring. He's about like 8 to 10 years elder than me, and he's like almost like a mentor and kind of big brother to me. So I pulled him in, and it's like so he put in some money. So we did not raise VC money till last institutional VC money till last December, which was almost I would say less than 5 years, almost 5 years into this. So we spent 3 years building the platform, and then 2.5 years in the market, get those initial customers, and we had some good names, and then we went out and raised the money. And there was a reason for it, and we could have raised some money, but we knew that if we were to raise money, that would actually inhibit us to build that solid foundation we wanted to build. Because once you get the VC money, then you have to that you go into the cycle, that 18-month fundraising cycle, and it's hard to kind of go and completely disrupt that. So it took us 3 years to build that platform, but we are so glad we did that, because this space is a noisy space, and you have to build a solid foundation if you want to go and cause a disruption.
You mentioned you learned a lot in your first venture, so you could not then do those same issues, only new challenges this time. If you had to think of one lesson learned from your previous venture that really helped you then execute Tellius even faster, what would be that?
Yeah, I would say that one of the lessons which we learned is the aspect around this product market fit. This takes just way longer than you ever expect. So that was kind of one of the lessons, which is what helped us, where we kind of knew that, and which is where a lot of the first time startup founders have that challenge, because they tend to underestimate that. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna build the product. Easy. It's gonna happen. So that is one of the, which is what helped us kind of plan through it, make sure we have the right product, make sure we go through some of those initial beta customers. So that's kind of one of the lessons.
What's a tactic when you're working on product market fit that has worked for you to then really drill in and find it?
I would say that I don't know if there's one kind of secret. It is certainly an iterative process. I would say it's an iterative process where I think the first thing I would say is that, you got to start with some defined criteria and objectives, but then kind of keep listening to the market and kind of tune that. And that's what we did. Even though we this was kind of the second company, but we still made lots and lots of mistakes. We hadn't unlocked all the formulas there. So what we realized was that there was a vision we had, but then we actually started going to the market and kind of testing that hypothesis. And even if some of those customers end up buying it, like, that doesn't really mean that you have a product market fit, because I think the real kind of inflection point happens when you have, a certain number of customers, but there is also kind of clustering start forming, because clustering in terms of they inhibit very similar behavior. And then also you start seeing kind of the adoption of the product kind of taking off. And I think when you see all of this happening, because earlier in an earlier time, we saw different companies adopting the product, but they were all very different use cases or so, because we didn't really realize, because with analytics, the biggest challenge you have is there's no one use case, right? The art of possible is up to your imagination, which makes it really hard and challenging in this area there.
This is something I've been talking to some other SaaS founders of. When you have a product that can be utilized in so many different ways and across industries, how do you build a common feature set, a common ability that serves them all without trying to go too far down one lane and alienating everyone else? How are you balancing that then?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So in analytics, what happens is, because and that's something which we are very clear that we won't build something which is going to work for one or two customers or few customers. So that's something which you always have to have a strong discipline around it. And it's always hard when you have a customer who is, ready to pay you, and then how do you draw the line and how do you convince that? It's always tricky. It's never easy. It's easier said than done. But I think that's where the key is, that you have to know which direction you're heading. Have to know your North Pole, like you have to know where you're heading. And once you have that, then yes, you could go a little bit, like you can make some variation. Like I think you have a core, I would call it, there's a core. And then there's kind of the adjacents, like, and you'll learn on the adjacencies, like, which ones are resonating better than the other. And then there's an area where you don't want to go, and you have to know, you have to really define that and then stay within that.
What have you seen when it comes to analytics and business intelligence, like the core use cases or abilities that everybody wants and needs?
What we call this category, actually in Tellius, we call this category as a decision intelligence. And the difference we see in decision intelligence is, so BI is pretty well defined. When it's well defined, meaning, you want reporting and dashboarding. I think that's kind of how BI has been synonymous with. When we look at decision intelligence as a space where we combine machine learning AI with this natural language interface, where business users or the analyst can, get answers across, terabytes of data, understand not only what's happening, but why things are changing and how you can improve outcome. That definition isn't very clear. It's not a clear-cut definer because it's a new category in a way. So that's is something which really excites us, because that's kind of setting up a new category. And when we even talk to the analysts, which is a very interesting thing we hear, is like, what breed are you? Are you the BI breed or the data science breed? And our typical answer is that, you don't have to fit into one of these breeds, because there's a lot of things have happened from technology perspective. So there's this new category of decision intelligence, which is going to bridge the gap between the BI and data science. And when we're excited to be kind of setting the standard for that, like how that is going to be defined. So I think the organization still try to wrap their head around what that is, which is a challenge in its own way. But it's also, I normally say, I want to be, I don't want to be one of those 50 companies trying to sell this. I want to be one of them who's trying to convince the customers and users there's a better way. And that's the new category, which is, its own challenge, but I think it's exciting to be in that category.
You paint the picture of, when it comes to new technology, a new way of doing things, the challenge of getting someone who's used to doing it a certain way to make them realize there is a better way. How have you done your messaging? How have you been able to convince people or engage them to come away from what they had been doing to seeing that there is a better way?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's not that we have figured out the magical answer for it. But I think what has really helped us there is focus on the customer use case and problem. So when we talk about decision intelligence as a category, I think that's one side of the positioning. But when you get down to the in the weeds, talking to the customers, they really don't care. What they really care about, the problem they have and how we can solve that. And I think that's a challenge. I was talking to someone about kind of the challenge in general MLA and AI is facing, while there's a lot of potential, is, how do you connect that with the pain point business user or the analyst is having. So what has helped us is focus on few industry verticals and the use cases to start with. So when we look at the technology side, which is very infrastructure and industry agnostic, but our go-to-market is not. So go-to-market is very focused on let's make sure that we can. And few of the industries we are focusing on is like pharmaceutical, life sciences, consumer goods and financial, and even within that, like few certain business units. So what we go is, when we go and pitch there, then we can actually just say how we are helping other pharmaceutical companies to do ABC, like whatever that is. And is kind of what's working for us. And then they say, okay, yes, you have a new way of whatever problem they have, which is like they are looking at market access or rebate analysis, or looking at improving the commercial effectiveness to launch their drugs in the market. So we approach it that way, which actually is much more effective. And actually the other side, the customer can understand it. And then we will keep expanding the library of those use cases as we grow. And there's a lot of potential there.
The ability for a company to get better intelligence, I'm sure, is everyone wants it. Everyone's be able to make better decisions. This technology, doing a Google search, one would say, of inside your company to figure out the answers that you want. Is how is that changing and growing? Is it just like works perfectly all the time? Is it flawless, or is it also still something that's being developed and grown, and it has still a future to get to?
Yeah, putting my sales cap, yes, it's flawless. It just works. Yeah,
of course, all the time, always.
It works all the time. Now, I think just practically, the way it is that you still have to connect to different data sources, and data is never clean. All these typical challenges are out there. So the way it is that while our focus is to make it really self-service, so people can just plug this in with your data sources, we have provided the flexibility where you could actually go and customize some of these things. So I think the challenge, which is very interesting, we were talking to someone, is what we focused on was how do we combine this ease of use with the flexibility? And that's a very tricky thing in MLAI, because either you get let's say if you get your iPhone, it has an embedded machine learning AI, but you can't customize it. And then on the other hand, you have these data science workbenches, which are very, very customizable. So how do you combine that? And that's kind of the focus we had, is when we go and connect to the organization, go and work with the organization, there is a lot of cleanup needs to happen. Cleanup in terms of how they define the names of these columns. Like, so if there's a data engineer, they always like to put underscores there. It's like, revenue underscore 123B. And then with the business user, it's like, oh, I don't want to put an underscore. And I want to put, normal word, like, this is my region revenue or whatever revenue. So how do you map that interface? That's one. And second thing is kind of setting up the data relationships is also key piece, that you got to set up how different things are linked to each other, because your businesses may have some better understanding on why they set their data model that way. So there's somewhat of that, which need some of that initial work, but it's still pretty self-service. Once you bring the data in and you hook up those pipes, you could actually, we have scenarios where you can get it up and running, in matter of a day or two. So it's not that the effort wouldn't be that, but yes, if you want to be very, and you can do, there's a lot of customization people want to do, and that's kind of where they can end up spending a lot of time.
If we paint the picture of the future, of where we're headed, using machine learning, I mean, what are some of the barriers that need to be broken down, that needs to change for us to get to the world where it doesn't matter how people form it, name things or whatever, it works? What's the future look like? What do we need to change?
Yeah, I would say the first piece which we see is that the cultural aspect, I think, is a big one right now, and which is where when we go to the organizations, one of the challenge where you see one group really excited about machine learning AI, because sometimes it's a top-down initiative, like CEOs like, oh, we got to get machine learning AI in the company, and then most of when you talk to these individuals, they're like, I don't know what that means, but we need machine learning AI. But then there's other set of users who are like, yeah, we don't know, we don't understand it. We have a list of 50 things we need to do on a daily, weekly basis. Leave us alone, right? So I think the cultural piece, meaning that kind of providing the guidance and knowledge around like why we are doing what we're doing and how it's going to help you, and eliminate some of those fear they may have, like their jobs will go away or it's too complicated. One of those scenarios could be there. So I think that I feel is there. I feel from a technology, so this is more kind of cultural. I think from a technology perspective, we are at an interesting inflection point with the cloud data warehouses like Snowflakes and Redshifts of the world, can store massive amount of data. And I think what we see, these interfaces, new interfaces we call, like, these Google-like interfaces coming in, people are still not sure how, that's going to work or how to use that. I think I feel like it's very similar, like Google search were launched, or different search engines were being launched in late 90s when, you had AOL, then Bing, then there was, Yahoo, Google, and then people like, okay, it makes sense. I think we're at a very similar point in business data. Business data is maybe slightly more complicated because there's more nuances there, but I think that's the future. I mean, there's no other way. Like, you can't be relying on other analysts or other advanced users to give you the answers to your basic questions. Like, business. That doesn't make sense, like where we are right now.
Being able to get to this future and for you to continue to build, obviously having the right team is essential. And it sounds like that you already from the beginning that you were focused on that. Has it been a challenge to find good talent? Because I've heard this, that there is quite a battle for good AI and machine learning abilities and talents. Is that the case, or is there been a big growth in the pool of available talent for people in AI?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say we really didn't face that much. I think there's a lot more hype around it than actual reality. And I think people are also confused about who they need. I think it's really not clear to organizations who they need. So there is what we call as machine learning AI engineers, and then you have applied ML. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the point being that if you want to try to build a new machine learning and AI algorithm, yes, you need those individuals who have PhD from Berkeley and all that stuff, right? But most of the organizations aren't really doing that because there's a lot of open source components available where you can actually stitch the existing pieces. So that's what we call as applied ML. So how you apply these existing algorithms, which you can write with a couple of lines of code. It's not that tricky, and then apply that. So, and I think organizations are sometimes confused between the two. The lines aren't very clear. So they end up hiring sometimes these machine learning engineers and make them do the other job, which then doesn't make those ML engineers very happy and satisfied. So I think we didn't face any such issues. I think what I feel is there's going to be, with the tools like Tellius and other companies who are innovating in this space. I mean, there's a lot of other companies who are automating the work of creating ML models. I think the bigger need is going to be around the data engineers and the data experts. We call them data ninjas. And the data ninjas are the ones who understand the domain knowledge. They have some SQL Python skills. And with the help of tools like Tellius, which is just automating some of the modeling piece, you can stitch these together, that builder mentality, like Legos, like you bring these together and then create this piece. You can actually do that. I think that's where we see the future heading. And that's how it's going to be democratized. There's no other way. This can be democratized and can be accessible in the organizations
for everyone. Wow. Yeah, I feel like your history and track record as CTO, and I feel like you were there in the weeds of it. How has your personal time changed, and how do you manage your time? I'm just curious, as a leader for other leads, like how are you a typical day? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, it's pretty messy there. I don't think I would say what certainly has helped in the last year, which I would say with pandemic, there were a lot of things which weren't good, but one of the things which was very good there was this whole aspect of I would say a better productivity gain and a better time management, which I think I certainly struggled with in the prior years. So I think the aspect of just managing it with to-do lists, which I think I always had to-do lists, but those to-do lists would normally get hijacked or get distracted with the other things which comes with that. I think it certainly has been better. So I know we all are thinking, what is this new hybrid work is going to look like? Is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? Is it 1 day a week? Is it zero? I don't know. I feel it's going to be few days a week. I think maybe a couple of days a week. And I see that hybrid. I'm actually very excited and looking forward to that. I think that hybrid, which certainly provides this balance of productivity and that interaction to kind of get the right mix there.
I am curious also of those who are coming back to the office or not, as the future that we're in, that everyone's just remote, where we're headed. Looking at just the future for a second overall, what are you most excited about in the business intelligence area for sure, but also I'm curious for machine learning and where it's headed and the opportunities it has?
Yeah, I would say that, we are very, very, very early stages of this whole, machine learning AI. There's a quote which I think Mark Andreessen used, that I guess about 10 to 15 years ago, he said that software is eating the word. But now AI is eating the software. So so what that means is that I think AI is going to be embedded in everything we do, like pretty much software is, right? So And I think with that, actually, just looking at it, like the amount of use cases and the possibilities, we are like not even 5% there in terms of looking into that and say what's the art of possible. So that's what's, I'll say, the exciting part is, as we progress further, is like different use cases and what machine learning can do for different activities there. And I think we see a lot of companies coming in doing some innovative stuff there, which is going to really change the way we work and we access data and we access information and analyze information. I think that's really changing. That's really, really exciting. I think I would say for the next 4 to 5 years, we would see a very rapid transformation happening. Like there used to be this word, data, digital transformation. I think the definition of that digital transformation is changing, and how AI is going to come in and change the way we work.
Do you think that this is only going to stay for enterprises and large organizations, or will smaller businesses and be able to take advantage of machine learning and be able to have this business intelligence?
And that's what our mission is, that we want to democratize machine learning and AI, and we believe the best vehicle for democratizing ML/AI is by putting it in the business analytics and business BI tools. So we are actually working with some mid-sized companies who are actually starting to use machine learning and AI, and we also believe that's the only way they can compete with these big giants, the Amazons and Googles, who have army of data scientists. I think the only way they can compete is by utilizing different companies who are innovating in that space. So we absolutely see that. We already have customers in that space, but I think we're still in the early stages of this whole journey.
It all comes back to data, right? How do people, are they keeping good access of their data, and are they ready to be able to pull it in for machine learning and take advantage of it? Yeah. Well, I appreciate Ajay for this journey that you've been on, and also your passion, where you already said, you're like, I don't want to be automated. I want to automate things and help other people automate it. And then this future that you paint, it's exciting to see where business intelligence will take us with machine learning. For those that want to learn more, whether you're an enterprise or mid-market or small business, want to start looking at better ways to take advantage of your data, you can go over to Tellius.com. That's TELLIUS.com. Thank you so much, Ajay. It's good to have you on.
Thank you, Alexander. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And we'll see you all on the next episode of UpTech Report.
Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.